So, my name is José. I think most of you know me. For those of you who don't, I am one of the co-organizers of the meeting, together with Deborah. Deborah, raise her hand. And Peter Hart, over there. Okay. So I am a recovering patent data groupie. Okay. Part of the many things that I'm recovering about. So what I'd like to do at the beginning is just give you some brief remarks, just to get us going, tell you a little bit about why we're here, talk a little bit about maybe some of the goals for this meeting, talk a little bit about the agenda, and then really start with the real presentations afterwards. Okay? Feel free to ask any questions as I go along. As I said, I'll be making mostly remarks about the meeting and the agenda. So here I am. I'm based at Arizona State University. That's the title of the meeting, somewhat long. The complexity of the patenting system, information, uncertainty, and novelty. And so I'll make a few remarks about why we're gathered here, who is gathered here, by the way. The very careful process by which you were carefully assembled. Okay. Something about the rules of engagement of the meeting and the agenda, and then, as I said, start really with the discussions. And this is, in a sense, is why we're here. Okay, this is about patents. This now happens to be my all-time favorite patent, because it happens to be a patent for a procedure that's keeping my wife alive. So this gives me a certain appreciation of what these inventions are. This is the foundational patent for immunotherapy, which is an approach for cancer treatment. And if I sit there, and sometimes I've sat there wonder, every so often, because of ASU, I don't have to pay anything. I have good insurance. But every so often, I do get a statement on the mail from the insurance company telling me, if you had to pay, how much would you have to pay? So I sit there wonder like, wow, this treatment costs $110,000 a pop. And I sit there wondering, wow. And so it's an interesting reminder that patents are about money. This patent was itself the subject of a spat between Merck and Bristol Myers, and almost $700 million ended up being exchanged. And projections are that this type of treatment around which new patents are being generated are going to be a market of $120 billion. So patents are about many things, one of them being about money. They're property rights, they're sold, they're bought. Inventors often patent with the expectation of making money. And there's a whole cottage industry around trying to get a patent like this and try to make predictions about is it going to be successful or not. That, in a sense, is not why we're here, although we are here, in a sense, to talk about patents. And it is true that patents are ultimately a legal instrument. They're a property right. They're enshrined in the Constitution. I like this phrase. I heard this phrase this past summer from Michael Koch, who is the chief IP officer for Syngenta, a company that has a lot of patents. A patent is a legal fence. And concerns about this tension between it is a property right, but at the same time it's a property right, it's a monopoly that's given in the expectation of promoting innovation. That tension is not a new tension. It has long been recognized. There's this very beautiful letter written by Thomas Jefferson to Isaac McPherson in 1813, which is basically one long rant against patents as property rights. So that's not a new concern. And I know that this concern, this tension, often is the subject of many discussions when people gather to talk about patents. Again, this is not so much why we're here. Okay, we're here more about this. For many of us in this room, myself included, we've used patent data as data on invention, with all the caveats that we tend to forget when we actually write our papers. But I like this phrase very much that was used by Zvi Griliches, one of the most important scholars who used patents to study invention. And he referred to this desert of data. And patents, we love them because, well, we can count them. And that's already such a powerful statement, correct? I'm sure most of you will believe. I'm sure most of you will agree if you ask, or if I ask Simon, do you believe that we today have more technologies than the ancient Romans had in 100 AD? You laugh, I laugh, and say, of course, okay. Go out and count them. Just tell me how many technologies did the Romans have, how many we have, and oh, look, we have so many. You know, for the many, many disciplines that study invention, technologies, innovation, it's very difficult to count them, okay? So patents seem to have this very appealing feature. We can count them, and we can do all sorts of things with them. And many of us in this room have built careers doing just that, okay? I'm not gonna go over this list, okay? And of course, more recently, because we can exploit the fact that patents have lots of words, lots of text. And there are a lot of people who are now beginning to use some of the text mining tools to extract more information about patents. But what I'd like to do is maybe remind us that when we use patents for that purpose, it is somewhat peculiar that in contrast to many other data that we use in economics, like take, for example, GDP. Whether or not you think GDP is a very good measure, we, again, will almost all agree that GDP is a measure of the size of an economy. It's built to be that. It's collected for that purpose. No one collects GDP data to make money out of it, okay? So when we see a plot of this, you know, this is taking GDP for the United States, 1790, 2016, natural log, we would probably all agree this is a portrait of what has happened to the US economy. And more than that, for example, if you are into economic growth theory and you are into making models of economic growth, as was pointed out by Charles Jones in the late 1990s, if you have a theory of economic growth, or if you build a model of economic growth in the United States, your model better be able to account for this. It better be consistent with that. Okay, so that's, now here's a plot for the accumulation of patents in 1790. We will probably all agree that what this plot is about is, well, it's a plot about the accumulation of patents, okay? But some would like to say, much like that's a portrait of the behavior of the US economy, this time series is the footprint of the invention process. Is this a portrait of inventive activity since the 19th century? Is this a very flawed portrait? We have a lot of discussions about that. And some of those discussions are going to be pertinent to our meeting, to the extent that we do use patent data as data about invention, okay? As was sent out in the emails, the invitation emails, and in the many versions of the agenda, and I apologize if we overloaded your email box with that, I find this statement from Kenneth Arrow, who is one of the founders of the Santa Fe Institute, by the way, statement 1962, a reminder of something that's very obvious, but it's easy to forget in the many, many discussions about patents. That when he wrote that invention ultimately is about the creation of information, it's about the taking of information and the creation of information, information that's created with a lot of uncertainty, and I don't think Arrow will have disapproved if I replace invention with patenting. So there's this perspective that is one of the themes about this gathering, okay? If we take seriously this perspective that the creation of patents is the creation of information. And another perspective that I would like to sort of highlight, which is kind of more recent, is this notion of the uncertainty surrounding patents, okay? Yes, every inventor thinks their inventions are gonna be great, maybe including those who got a patent for the use of a laser pointer for an aerobic device for cats. I have a lot of cats. I do that often. I never thought of patenting that, but I was too late. But Lemley has, and Shapiro, they argue that often the true value of a patent is going to be revealed by, well, first patent it, release it in the market, and see if it flies. So this notion that uncertainty is an integral part of the process of invention from the start, from the first thinking about a new invention to even when you get this property right. How much is it worth? Is it going to make money to anyone? Is it going to be challenged? Is it going to survive? So this notion that invention, and let's for a moment agree that patenting is a proxy for invention, is both about information processing, the creation of information, but in the context of tremendous uncertainty, okay? that are two aspects that I will argue are not unique to this system, which brings me to the patent system, okay? That's a phrase that's very often used. Most people will in this world refer to the patenting system. Certainly a lot of discussions about the system is broken. There are a few people who actually argue the system is fine. And what this perhaps does not happen that much is to step back and think, well, just what is this system? And this is a system that I'm not very good at making diagrams, and I did not try, Some will argue it's a system that has lots of parts, lots of actors. It's a historical system, and Sarina is going to talk to us about that. This is a system that has been in the making over at least 150 years. It's not a system that has been guided by any central plan. That's how I would say it's emergent. Yet somehow this system takes in information about the external world and is supposed to create information, these packets, these patents, that some of us treat as indicators that inventive novelty has arrived in the world. That's why for many of us they're useful. And this is a system that also operates under a lot of constraints, legal constraints, political constraints. Okay? I will argue that often when thinking about the quality of patents as a proxy for inventive activity, in the many discussions that occur about what's wrong with this system, what needs to be changed about the system to make it better, often its nature as a system is not really taken seriously. And I thought, and some of us thought, that it might be useful to have a gathering where we take seriously the fact that, yeah, the patent system is a system. That we take seriously that it's a system that tries to take in information under a set of conflicting constraints, and some of these constraints often are conflicting. Be accurate, be fast, be fair, okay? Those are not easy constraints to meet, but then to realize that under that description, there are many systems in nature. There are many systems in human society, in human life, that also have to process information. We have studied many such systems. We have some insights into systems that try to take information under conditions of uncertainty to create information about the world and do that repeatedly. And it might be then helpful to reflect on the patenting system as a system from the perspective of what we have learned studying such systems. That's not to ignore the details and the specificity of the patent system. For many of you, those details are very important. And to think about what are the constraints and what are the trade-offs under which this particular system operates. The system that we all expect and trust to produce this package of information, patents, that we do believe are useful proxies, okay?